right, we're back. Welcome to episode 9 of the Mind Soul Connection. My name is Jamie Blaustein. I'm your host and CEO of the Sylvia Braffman Mental Health Center, here with my fellow co-founder, Ben Braffman. How are you, Ben?
Hey, I'm doing well. This is fantastic.
Good.
It's a good
Yeah,
day.
we're getting some momentum here, which is great. And I think last week's episode is really going to be hard to beat. We did the movie draft, movies depicting mental illness and addiction. And
Fun one.
it was fun. So we need to think of more creative stuff like that to do. Any suggestions? Definitely encourage those out there to comment on either YouTube or our Instagram. Mind Soul Connection is the handle. On our website, wherever. We are open to suggestions, and we appreciate any and all shares of the podcast. So today, I really want to talk about the nurture part of the equation when we talk about nature versus nurture. A lot of people view mental illness in this, or I should say, through the prism of what came first, the chicken or the egg. Is mental illness a result mostly of chemicals in the brain, genetics, aka nature, or is it mostly a result of the experiences that we have through our lives, how we're treated by others, nurture? And so I think the answer is that it's an interplay of the two. And I think that's what you would probably say, and I'll ask you in a minute.
Sure.
But today I want to focus on the nurture component, which basically means I want to know what, in your view, Ben, are the top components of the environmental and social world that we live in that drive mental illness and recovery as well. So before we get into what your top sort of components are, what is it? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it both?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely both. I mean, you can you can see that just in any literature or treatment program, or if you interview families. Absolutely, it's both.
Do you think, though, that certain diagnoses are more driven, on the whole, are more driven by nature versus nurture, right? Like we could talk about, and this is, again, my layman perspective,
Sure.
from what I've seen at the Sylvia Braffman Mental Health Center, that something like schizophrenia feels more like nature, right? Like genetic or chemical.
Yeah.
And obviously trauma, I think by definition, is nurture, right?
So let me categorize it for you. So if you take it from a clinical perspective, and you take Axis 1, which is thought disorders, right? That's nature, right? That's chemical. Probably 90% of people diagnosed with the thought disorder, it comes from DNA, genetic makeup, all of that stuff. As you get closer into mood disorders, so then you have you also have mood disorders, and then Axis 2 is personality disorders. You move into nurturing. You move into the view of the world, the view of self, the view of others, and a lot of times what's happened to that individual in that viewpoint. What has basically defined them? What experiences have they had? And that's a good way to kind of separate the two when you're discussing nature versus nurture. Now, that being said, there are times when things like schizophrenia, it is part of nurturing, because it could be an environmental thing, where a person is experiencing a certain type of communication. And I'll give you an example. A type of communication that impacts somebody profoundly is what's called double bind communication. And double bind communication is you're giving two messages at once. So imagine every day of your life for the first 18 years of your life, every day, 100 times a day, you're getting a double message each time. So I'll give you an example. So a mother says to her son, come here, I want to give you a hug. And the son goes, and the mom hugs him and whispers in the ear, you're fat and you smell, pushes him away. Come here. And so the son is sitting there going, what the hell? Like, and how could I be mad at my mom and all this? That could induce some of the more powerful thought disorders, some of the more powerful mental illnesses that we deal with. So it's not always, nature's not always nurture, but I just wanted to give you that example.
It's certainly not cookie cutter. That's
No.
I've learned a lot in the last couple of years on that, and that's part of why like you're so big on the right diagnosis. Because it is there is a feel that you need to have to be a really good clinician, to be a good doctor. There's a gut level component to all of this. And so what, Ben, would you say are the top, call it 3 to 5 environmental and social influences that impact mental illness?
So I want to define it this way. I want to define it through are we helping or hurting? So that's number one. Number two is the environment safe? And number three is, what is the foundation? So helping and hurting is, we're, as parents or as nurturers, your son or daughter, falls, skins their knee. Your natural tendency is to go help them, and pick them up and clean up their boo-boo and all that stuff. So do you still do that at age 5? Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. Do you still do that at age 10? Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. Age 15? Yeah, okay. Age 20? I don't know. I think you can kind of get that's where it starts to shift between helping and hurting. Again, I'm giving a simplistic example of skinning your knee, but I think you understand where I'm going with it. So that's a major factor. The second one is safe. Can I be the person that I am? Can I be my actual self versus this fake self, or what some psychologists call pseudo self? So I'll give you another simplistic example. You're sitting at the dinner table and little Johnny burps or he farts, right? And the father leans in and says, if you do that again, I'm going to smash your head in, right? So now Johnny goes, oh shit, like, I don't know if I should be doing that. And maybe he does it again and he gets blasted. So now he's slowly but surely becoming this pseudo self, right? He can't be his natural self. So it's not safe for him anymore. He has to protect himself from the wolves at the door, right? And again, a simplistic example, but I think you understand. The third one is foundation. I had mentioned this in another podcast, but being your roots and being in one place and having consistency or constancy is one of the psychological terms. Having that foundation is critical to the environmental aspect that you're talking about. Am I helping or hurting? Is it safe? And then this foundation that I have, all right, we're going to be here. This is my home. I can plant myself. Massively important. So those are really my top 3.
Yeah.
And how
so all of that though is within the home, right? It's sort of like I think you're talking about nurture in terms of upbringing, right? So it's a and you're really big on family systems, right? Yeah. So do you think that family systems and the way in which you are brought up from, call it birth to a certain point in time, do you think that drives the vast majority of whether someone has an illness or not? Because like in my mind, when I'm saying, hey, give me your top, right? I'm thinking, well, there's family, there's finance, there's romance, right? And I noticed it's very interesting because I think it speaks to the fact that you're so talented with families and you're so into family systems that your answer revolved around that specifically.
Right. And so, yes, I mean, to answer your question, your upbringing, it's a massive influence. And what's fascinating to me about it is that you could have 2 siblings And really they had two sets of parents, right? Like the older sibling may have experienced one thing and then the younger one experiences another thing. And that's why, it's not cookie cutter. It's not, one size fits all. The parents may have taken a different approach, which guides, what has happened to the person. Maybe there's certain events that happen in a certain time period, that are going on. Maybe not, but that 100%, your parental influence is massive.
And I think that's interesting because I think that it's not mutually exclusive, meaning you're talking about sort of the fabric of their view on the world, their natural set point in terms
Right.
of how safe and secure they feel. When I say like finance and romance, right? When I work with guys in recovery, like we often talk about the fact that those are the two biggest things that we tend to have fear around and the two biggest triggers, right? But having limited funds in your bank account or not going out with the girl that you have a crush on, that can certainly like exacerbate whatever your set point is.
Yep.
But don't you agree that like something is fundamentally off if it's going to impact you to such a degree that you're going to go on sort of like a mental health tailspin?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I wanted to also make a comment that, if you grow up in a household, whatever it is, one of the things that it's supposed to do is prepare you for the world. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And what we do, consciously or not, is we reenact wherever we came from. We reenact it. We reenact it with our relationships, with our education, with our social activity, with friends, wherever we go. And if it doesn't compute, then there's stressors in our life, which also could lead, if it's not dealt with, could lead to depression, anxiety, drug use, all of that stuff. For example, if a person grows up in an environment where they've never heard the word no, and then they go out into the big bad world and all they hear is no, they're going to have a problem with that. I mean, that's going to lead to some issues, whether that's, anger, whether that's, anxiety, whether that's drug addiction, that is definitely going to be dysfunctional.
So in my mind, trauma is, again, sort of like the epitome of a nurture type driver of mental illness, right? Because
Sure.
By definition, it's something happened.
Right.
And we talked about that, I think, on episode 3 or 4, that it's really about how it's experienced.
Yep.
And how it lives on really in the mind of somebody. Do you find that word trauma is overused? Is it underused? Is that as commonplace as it seems, where that something happened?
Yeah.
And as a result, it's driven them into depression. It's driven them into anxiety.
So it is overused. The word trauma is, it has negative connotations. It's terrifying to experience a trauma. And I do believe that now it's sort of like it's everybody's favorite flavor, and everything's a trauma. I don't adhere to that. And so the way that I move around that so that I don't offend people is I like to discuss the meaning. Well, what's the belief? What's the meaning behind what you're talking about? And what can we do to rewrite your story? What can we do to have a different narrative? And that's where the magic happens. Because if I hone in on, okay, yeah, it's trauma, and I kind of just collude with the patient or family on, this is trauma, I got a paper cut, it's trauma, I was late for school, it's trauma, I was fender bender, it's trauma. No, I want to know the meaning behind it, and the belief system that we have. That's the stuff that sticks with us. That's the stuff that still to this day, maybe you had a thing with you and your brother, and to me, if you told me, I'd be like, yeah, so what? But to you and your brother, it meant something. Yeah. Right. And that you're still to this day, you struggle with it. I let go of your hand, on on that cliff, and you fell 20 feet, and I thought you were going to die, and I still have nightmares about that. Like we have these, we have what's the meaning we attach to it, and then unraveling that meaning is so powerful. Kind of putting it in its place, in its right bucket.
So obviously, when I think about drugs and alcohol, right, that on one hand is environmental, I guess, right, but it's impacting your brain chemistry as well. So it's sort of a combination of both, and it goes to the chicken or the egg conversation, right? Did it tweak your chemistry to the point where you started experiencing mental health symptoms?
Right.
So we could talk all day about that. One of the things that I'm seeing, though, being that we're a primary mental health facility, is that the weed these days, like it's not your grandfather's weed.
I was going to say
your father's weed.
No, it's not. No,
I mean, back in the day, smoked a little weed, chilled out. Whatever is going on now. I mean, things are a lot different since we hung up the cleats, but it is provoking some sort of delusion, schizophrenia. I don't know what it is, but are you seeing a lot of that?
I am. I read a report that the weed smoking is very similar to the opiate high that perhaps you and I used to get. It's pure, it's more powerful. They have, an abundance of strands that, people use. God only knows what they're ingesting and how it's impacting, brain chemistry. I know memory is being impacted, greatly. It has to be impacting the brain chemistry, as you alluded to before, especially with young folks whose brains are still developing. So it has to be a consequence to all of this.
And so if mental illness is exacerbated by an environmental factor or social factor, is your view that a clinical approach, whatever modality that may be, and a spiritual approach is the best avenue to attack it under, and that medication is more addressing the symptoms of it?
So I think that the first thing is, and if we're talking about any type of drug use, that needs to stop, right? The drug use or abuse or dependency, that needs to stop. That needs to be arrested. And then the rest of it can follow, whether it's, clinically, whatever modality, the spiritual component is never going to be a bad thing. That's how you assist people, individuals, and families. And then the medication might be necessary. The fact is that medication, the reason that people use medication is because their brain chemistry doesn't produce a certain chemical. So naturally, let's use a medication that produces that chemical that gives you more stability.
Yeah, this is we could probably go on all day about this. Do you think, though, that today, and not to be like a grumpy old grandpa, but do you think that society and today's environment is more prone to cause mental illness? I mean, we could talk all day about what are the differences between today versus 30 years ago, and then and I don't know. Look, there could be a number of things, right? Like it's more for a lot of, like you say, it's for a lot of the good and bad reasons. Mental health is very much at the foreground of the social conversation today. So part of it too is that the stigma has likely been reduced, so people are talking about it more. But there's probably a component that between one of the things that pops into my mind is technology. Technology can't be helping, right? I mean, when and there's a social element to it as well, right? When you are feeling depressed and isolated, and especially if you're like a teenager and you're looking at your phone and you're seeing the cool kids or the girls or whatever it may be doing something and you're not included, that can only exacerbate whatever you may be going through, right? So technology has to be a big driver, probably negatively, right?
Irresponsibility. I mean, 100%. It's a massive driver. It's causing suicides. It's causing different degrees of mental illness. And it's not going away. It's not going away. And you alluded to the mental illnesses that are out there now. I don't. I'm going to say something a little controversial, but the gender identity and identifying as he, she, then, them. I'm seeing a lot of that in our treatment center, and I'm seeing that nationally. I don't know yet if that is just the identity of this generation, and they are sort of becoming, or this is a mental illness that we haven't seen yet, and that we're dealing with it. And I'm gonna stop short of saying exactly where I think it's at, but it's I see these people really struggling with look at me, I'm a person, and I have an identity, and I mean something, and I'm sitting here going, why do you need to do the things that you're doing? And so I'm leaning towards the mental illness part of it, but I still know
it's in the DSM, isn't gender dysphoria?
There, that is in the DSM, but I don't know yet.
Yeah,
I don't have enough data yet to say, these people are mentally ill. I don't think that's fair. All right. I don't think that's a fair thing. I want, on the other side of me is that if you identify as a table, then be a table. I don't care.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of people will take different angles at assessing that question.
Yeah.
Regardless,
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go
ahead. I wanted to say this to you because we're talking about nature and nurture. That COVID messed us up. I think that literally, and maybe I'm going to be too simplistic. What I'm going to say is that we isolated ourselves and we dealt with this virus. And I think people had too much damn time on their hands. They stopped working. They started thinking too much. They started doing things that they wouldn't normally do. They didn't socialize, and we need to socialize. And from there has been a marked increase in this gender identity, in depression, in anxiety, in trauma, than we've ever seen before. There's a spike, and that has to be one of the markers that we're dealing with. Has to be
COVID, and I think you kind of pair that with the technology aspect of things, right? You're sitting at home and you're scrolling on your phone. It's not good. It's really not. And I think that social media and technology actually has added a lot of great things to society and to our lives. But there's certainly the flip side of the coin, which we've talked a lot about. So any concluding thoughts on sort of anything else that comes to mind before we wrap up?
I do want to share one thing. It's a personal little story. My niece, my brother's kid, she killed herself a few years ago. She was a twin, and Samantha was her name. Anyway, nice girl, and she was in some type of relationship, and a lot of it was on social media and heavily influenced by social media. And I was at the funeral, and there was about 30 of her friends were there, and I said to them, what happened? And then, after a little bit of time of being uncomfortable, they all said that social media did her in, so to speak, made her think things that maybe she wouldn't have. Definitely influenced her. If you look at her Google research and all of that, like you said, that there's an image that we like to portray. And I don't think that she met that image. And unfortunately, she killed herself. So it hits home. It's tragic. But like I always say, we have more to do.
Yeah, no, I think it's additive to an extent, but if you become consumed, I mean, we're seeing a lot of gaming addiction, social media addiction. It's probably the social media stuff. I mean, I have 8 hours a day on my phone, like of screen time, I think, right? Like that's a lot. Now I'm not staring at it for 8 hours, right? Sometimes I'm listening to music at the gym. But it feels like a little bit
We're
much.
on our phones way too much. I mean, I am, you are.
I'm obsessed, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And
100%.
I've been on silent retreats where there's no phones, right? And what you notice is that for the first day, you're constantly grabbing it, like, oh, I don't have that. So it's certainly a distraction.
We're a little spoiled. I mean, I want information in seconds, and you just Google it and it's there.
I saw a meme the other day. It was like, I wonder why I can't fall asleep. Like I have this light in front of my face with literally all the information in the world, like at my fingertips. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I look at my phone and I'm up for an hour. That's not good.
No, it's not.
It's really not. So I would love to get to a point where we're kind of living in a more, natural, organic way, and like focusing, being present, focusing on the relationships that we have. I don't think we're going to move back in that direction, unfortunately. But unfortunately,
I'll give you an example. I'm going to the mountains next week, and I'm really hoping that I don't have service. But I have anxiety.
I hope you do have service.
Exactly. This is exactly my point. And I have anxiety over it. So I'm already thinking, let me tell you what I already thought. I wonder if there's a landline, and I'll give Jamie the phone number to the landline in case I need to speak to him. I mean, so that's how much it influences our thought process.
We need like a Sylvia Brethman owl where I could just like send it to you.
I would love that.
Yeah, we'll get that.
Yes.
It'll be our mascot. So, all right. Well, this was super insightful, and I don't know if we're moving in the right direction or the wrong direction. I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of being able to treat some of these, the byproduct of some of these environmental factors that drive mental illness. And I think we might be moving in the wrong direction in terms of the number of different things that could really exacerbate and push people in the direction of feeling more mentally unwell. So we'll have to see, more will be revealed, how everything unfolds. Regardless, as always, great conversation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for all the listeners and watchers. Again, if you are somebody that needs help, we are standing by to be helpful at sylviabrafman.com. Please watch, share, comment on the podcast. We're on YouTube. We're on Instagram. Our website, of course, Spotify, Apple, really anywhere that you might watch any sort of media these days. So thank you very much and look forward to next week.